Good evening, I'm John Fugelsang, and this is Viewpoint. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. President Obama played down the global chase for NSA leaker Edward Snowden today on a visit to Senegal, saying he hasn't called the presidents of China or Russia over the case because it's purely a legal issue. Clearly peeved by the ongoing saga, Obama said he was not going to raise the stakes by intercepting a flight carrying Snowden should he leave Russia.
No, I'm not going to be scrambling jets to get a 29-year-old hacker.
Oh, well, that's too bad for the Hollywood heads already imagining the movie, because Ben Affleck has you scrambling jets in his film, sir. Now, the intrigue has been amplified by reports that Snowden did not fly to Havana, Cuba as planned and remains in Russia for now. Earlier this week, President Putin said Snowden was free to leave Russia and waxed poetic as the standoff sparked talk of a new age Cold War, saying, "I'd prefer not to deal with this issue at all. It's like shearing a pig, too much squeaking, too little wool." That's funnier with a Russian accent. He continued, "The sooner he chooses his final destination, the better it will be for us and him." And the rest of us as well, sir. Meanwhile, WikiLeaks is in the game helping Mr. Snowden apply for political asylum in Ecuador, a country that's now going into its second year sheltering Julian Assange at their London embassy. Joining us now is Michael Ratner, President Emeritus of the Center for Constitutional Rights and the U.S. Attorney for Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. Michael, what a pleasure to have you on Viewpoint. Welcome.
It's nice to be with you, John.
Our whole staff was so excited to have you today. There are so many questions I want to ask and so little time. But Mr. Assange came forward recently to say that Mr. Snowden is safe and healthy, and he's reportedly hanging out in a travel lounge somewhere in Russia. So what role is WikiLeaks, and by extension Mr. Assange, playing in the Snowden case?
Well, as you said, I'm the lawyer for WikiLeaks and Julian Assange in the United States. I actually don't know what they have done other than what they have said publicly. And publicly they have said that they helped facilitate getting him out of Hong Kong. They as well helped giving him legal and diplomatic advice, and that at least in the beginning of the trip, someone from WikiLeaks organization, their legal part apparently, accompanied Ed Snowden. At this point, the last we heard about where he was really from President Putin, that said he was in the transit lounge at the Moscow airport. It's interesting what's going on. Mr. Putin, President Putin, made a very strong statement saying that in his view, Ed Snowden has a human rights quality about what he's done, that they would not send him to the United States, but that he probably should go to another country, indicating they don't really want him in Russia. President Obama, as you said, said that this is a legal matter. In fact, it's not a legal matter. It's completely a political matter. It's a question of, is another country going to give him asylum? Is another country going to accept Ed Snowden? Is the U.S. going to put so much pressure on the small countries of the world that might give it to him, Ecuador, Venezuela, whatever, that they have to fold? So far, I think the most amazing news to me today was that Ecuador said we will not be bullied by the United States. Ecuador has trade preferences that allow them to sell, I guess, broccoli and roses, et cetera, cheaply to the United States or without tariffs, and that's coming up in July.
And they're willing to risk it.
And they said today, we don't care about those tariffs. We will not be bullied. That's an incredible statement by a South American country, considering the history of our country's domination of South America.
Yes, I look forward to Sean Hannity screaming about them any day. Now, when you say WikiLeaks has helped him, we're talking financially.
Well, they did say, I recall WikiLeaks said that they had paid for his ticket out of Hong Kong.
And he's being accompanied by a colleague of yours?
No, not a colleague of mine.
But a WikiLeaks legal personnel?
Somebody that WikiLeaks has who's from the UK. What's interesting about having to pay for his ticket or paying for his ticket is it indicates that Ed Snowden has no money.
Well,
I mean, let's think about that for a second. All these charges about, Ed Snowden is this and that. He hasn't sold, obviously, anything to anybody. His statement was really, I thought, very beautiful about why he was doing what he did. But it's an indication that he really took a huge risk in doing it.
So what would you say legally are Mr. Snowden's options at this point?
Mr. Snowden is free to leave Russia, as President Putin said. He has to find a country that is willing to take him and stand up to the onslaught of the United States, military, economic, political. So far, he has applied to Ecuador for asylum. Ecuador seems promising to take him, although it's a very small country, 9 million people, not a lot against the United States. Venezuela would be another one. And then you're talking about the two big countries left in the world, which is China and Russia. And Ed Snowden has indicated that he didn't want to go to either of those countries originally because he doesn't want to be seen as really involved in those countries. He wants to really be seen as having disclosed what's happening to the American people, but also to people around the world with this massive surveillance system.
Let me ask, do you think Mr. Snowden could have possibly handled this situation any way differently if you were advising him from the beginning? Would you have suggested he approach this in any different ways?
You know, I would not have recommended he use the, quote, whistleblowing system set up in the United States. The people who've used that, Thomas Drake being one of them, got punished very badly for doing it, got indicted for espionage, and only because of a lot of support got out from under that. The other thing about whistleblowing within the U.S., this massive surveillance program that's taking in all this data on you and I and everybody in this country and everybody probably around the world has been approved, sadly, by people in Congress, by the executive, and by a secret court. And so what kind of whistleblowing could he do when all of the governmental powers are essentially against him? He had no real choices. Now,
and when essentially everything he's blowing the whistle on is legal.
That under this country's terms, it's legal.
The new normal, this stuff's legal.
Right. I mean, you know, I was thinking about, I'm a child of the 70s, and had this happened in the 70s, people would be screaming. When we had the entire surveillance system, the FBI, going after us in the United States, there were church committee hearings. It was huge. And now we're seeing almost very little said about this whole system. Instead, they want a car chase, and they put O.J. Simpson on, you know, in a car chase, and that's what they're doing. People should be very concerned by this massive surveillance system.
Well, I think a lot of them are. We had Michael Moore sitting in that chair a few days ago, and you know, he's got a lot of high-profile advocates as well as a lot of high-profile critics. But I was wondering, what is the status right now of WikiLeaks as an organization? Because a lot of us were surprised that he went to our friend Glenn Greenwald at The Guardian, he's been on this show many times, and didn't actually go through Julian Assange and WikiLeaks.
Well, WikiLeaks distributes documents. I mean, they look at them before they distribute them, but they distribute documents. They don't write the articles on them. And so he went to a person like Glenn Greenwald, who's an outstanding journalist, just outstanding. I mean, I remember I used to write articles for a couple of the magazines that he did, and once I saw his articles, I said, what am I bothering for? The guy is so good. So I think he went to somebody with a broad outlet. The Guardian has, you know, it's a very large newspaper, who would actually write up these articles in a way in which people could consume them and not have to start on the raw data. But I don't know what was in his head.
Could he have gone through, that's a spy, by the way, from NSA. Could he have actually gone to WikiLeaks, though? Does WikiLeaks have the infrastructure right now to release data like this if he'd leaked it to them?
Yes. WikiLeaks has, in the last 2 years, released a significant amount of data. It released the Kissinger diplomatic files. It released the Syria emails and a number of what's called the Stratfor emails, the private CIA. So WikiLeaks has been steadily releasing material, and very interesting material.
So I'd like to talk to you for a second about the difference between Mr. Snowden and Bradley Manning and WikiLeaks and journalists like James Rosen and others who have been targeted in very different ways as of late. It seems like activism and journalism are merging in a way, but I would argue, I guess that's always been the case, going back to Patrick Henry or Jack Reed. We've always had a long history of this. Do you see this as being a new trend and that this is going to be the new influential kind of journalism?
Well, I think we have the internet now, which allows, you know, massive dissemination as well as massive collection, and therefore you get out much more strongly what your message is. And I think the government is concerned by that. They're concerned by people being able to get material off the internet and material they think ought to be protected. And therefore they're hitting these people with what we call a new crime, the conspiracy to commit journalism, which is what we sort of call what's happening. Because if you look at Rosen case, really tells me about what's going on here. James Rosen was a journalist for Fox News, and then when they wanted to go after his source, they got a search warrant against James Rosen based on the fact that they said he was a co-conspirator with his source. That's really serious. And Fox, and he deserves to be defended, obviously. The problem is, of course, when Julian Assange did what he did, they accused him, of course, of a similar co-conspirator with Bradley Manning.
Yes.
And Fox said, let's bury him in the ground.
Sarah Palin called him a traitor, even though he's not actually an American
So it's the old
citizen.
story. You have to start with the most vulnerable when you defend them. And that's what we have to do in this country, because if you look at where these people are, look at Julian Assange is in the embassy, can't leave. Bradley Manning, as we speak, is in the closing part of the prosecution's case at Fort Meade. He could spend a life in prison for what he's doing. Jeremy Hammond, who is the Stratfor hacker, the private intelligence company, he's sitting a few blocks away at Metropolitan Correctional Center. Ed Snowden is in the airport at Russia. So we're talking about a serious attack on information that we ought to have to be in a democracy.
Like many, I was a bit confused by the charge of espionage, since, as you point out, sir, Mr. Snowden wasn't working for any other country. He wasn't getting paid for it. He's very much a leaker. And so I guess my question to you is, do you acknowledge that he broke the law?
Well, he under American law, yes. What he did was he had a security clearance, and then he signed a paper that said he wouldn't reveal that, and there's laws against revealing secure documents. On the other hand, when you're a whistleblower, the law is also, and people have actually argued this and been acquitted based on this, when you demonstrate government criminality or deceit, that is above that particular law you're breaking, and you're a whistleblower and you're protected. And one of the reasons Ed Snowden is, in my view, entitled to asylum is because asylum actually overcomes the claim that he broke the law. You're given asylum for expressing political opinion. Political opinion, even in this country, is considered to be truth-telling and whistleblowers. And therefore, it overcomes that technical argument that you broke the law.
Of course, Julian Assange is still stuck in the UK. What's going on with his case right now?
Well, what's going on is he took refuge in the embassy of Ecuador. He was given political asylum by the Ecuadorians for the same reasons I've just said, which is whistleblower, protected speech. People have said, well, he's in there because he doesn't want to go to Sweden and answer questions about sexual misconduct allegations. In fact, that's not the case. In fact, why he's in there, we've had recent articles now, just recently one about the case in the United States against him. If he winds up going to Sweden, it's a one-way ticket to a prison in the United States. That's what I've told him that. I think the United States is really after a major investigation around him. And what we've asked is that the Swedish come to the embassy in London and ask him the questions they want. There's no charges in Sweden, just ask him the questions. The Swedish won't, which makes you think there's some reason they want to get him out of there and into Sweden and then have a one-way ticket to here.
How do you see it playing out with both Mr. Assange and Mr. Snowden?
I think we're at an amazing point in this country and in this decade about the collision between the government controlling the knowledge that the people ought to have and controlling the internet, and people are going to expose it. And I don't know how it's going to come out. Let's just hope it comes out on the side of an open democracy and not a closed system. As I say often, democracy dies behind closed doors. Let's hope we don't have that.
Michael Ratner is Julian Assange's lawyer here in the States. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
John, thank you.
What a pleasure.